There we go.
Do we have notes?
Yeah, I started a HackMD doc. Let me share that.
Could you share it in the chat?
Yeah, just one sec.
So thanks everyone for coming. This is the internationalization meeting.
Yay!
And as far as an agenda, I didn't put one in there. Someone edited my comment and added one, so thank you, kind person. I have not been very active except setting up this meeting. So that's my update.
That was an important step. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
No problem.
So I dropped a couple links in the sidebar there. One is to a HackMD doc. This is what we've been using on the Electron team lately for collaborative note-taking. So it should be free for anyone to edit.
Rad.
You shouldn't have to log in.
It is an awesome tool. I highly support using it.
Also, I created a GitHub project for the i18n repo. Put all our issues and pull requests in there, and put them in some rough semblance of priority order. But it's totally open to change. So what I was hoping we could get accomplished today is actually logging into Crowdin and configuring our integration and flipping the switch on some languages and basically getting Crowdin into a state where people can actually start logging in and translating node docs.
Woo!
I think we're pretty much set up for that.
Yeah.
There are a few things blocking it. We could kind of like do a high level look at everything that's going on, or I could just like dive into the thing that seems the most blockery to me.
Really quick, before we do that, can we just, I feel like we should just do like a really quick, hey, my name is, and this is who I am within the group.
Cool. Sure.
I'll start. My name is Ben. I'm a developer advocate at Envision, the only one there. And I help out with Node internationalization as much as I can, and ComCom, and excited to be here doing this. Tiago? No problem if you can't. Mikhailo? Would you like to give an introduction?
Yeah. Hey everyone.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm Andrei's colleague. I believe you're familiar with him. So I would like to introduce you to Crowdin quickly. So basically, Crowdin, as you already may know, is a localization management tool that helps manage the process, and you may be interested in integrations we provide. Basically, the process starts with a project creation. It can be done with the profile page. And as soon as the project is created, you can set up the integration, or if you have a repository on GitHub, and invite the participants to start the overall process.
Mikhailo,
yeah.
I think we're planning to get at this in the agenda a little bit later, like a deep dive or a little bit more into that. But we should probably we wanted to go through and do introductions for everyone real quick before we get that stuff.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing that. And I think we'll probably try to do deep dive in a bit.
Yep.
Sure, of course.
excited to share though. Awesome, cool. Thanks, Mikhailo. Zeke?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Good to have crowd in people here as well. Appreciate you jumping in on the call. So I work at GitHub. I'm on the Electron team, where I mostly deal with the website and documentation and internationalization. And I'm excited to carry over some of the stuff we did on Electron to Node.js.
Woohoo!
Vanessa. Hi.
Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa. I'm also on the Electron team, and I helped out a bit with the internationalization stuff for the documentation as well. I don't know who hasn't gone.
I can go next.
Okay.
So hi, I'm Tierney Siren. I'm a developer advocate at NodeSource, and I'm chair of the Node.js community committee, and generally try to help with Node.js things. And Dhruv said he's having internet issues. He put his introduction in the text. So he's Dhruv Jain, and he's a member of the website redesign and internationalization working groups.
Might just give one more shout out to Tiago if he's available. If not, totally fine. Tiago, you there?
Yes, my name is Tiago.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you. And if you want to share a little bit about yourself, that's cool. If not, no worries. Okay, no problem. No problem, Tiago.
Did we
Hi,
want
Tiago.
translators for Tiago? Didn't we need translators during this call? Weren't we gonna?
Yeah, I think we need to.
We dropped the ball on that.
Drop the ball.
Tiago, are you Portuguese? Disculpe, we failed to get translators. So maybe next time things will be tudo bem, but right now we're sorry.
Yeah, really sorry about that. All right, I think that's about everybody. Zeke, you want to carry on?
I'm Richard. I'm on the Internationalization Committee.
Hey.
I'm largely here because I work on lower resource languages. Since the last call, I actually wrote like a huge thesis on it. Hasn't really been edited yet, but that's why I'm here. And excited to be involved. Woo!
Woo!
Cool. So the issue that's at the top of my mind is, both for Electron and for Node, is what versions are we planning to translate? So I have an open pull request, which I can drop a link to in here. It's actually 83 and 84 on the i18n repo. 83 is probably the one to look at first. I looked at the existing Node.js website and the kind of general practice of what versions are shown and how that's managed on the website now. And the gist is the latest versions of each major are favored. So instead of having every 10 dot whatever, it's just 10.x and 9.x and 8.x. So I think a good practice for us would be to have this kind of ever-changing underlying actual version with a non-changing generic major directory name like 10x. So this PR updates the build script, the content collection script, to pull in 10, 9, 8, and 6, which are all still sort of in some stage of being supported. Node 4 fell off the map a month ago or something like that. So we'll pull it out. And Node 7 is also not supported anymore. So
Neither Node 9 should also be EOL at this point. It might not have made it to the site, but it technically is EOL.
okay. So we should yank it right now?
I would, like, it's worth it to just not put more effort into it when it's going to be EOL anyway.
Okay.
honestly, this is like I didn't mean to interrupt. Please
No,
tell
it's
me.
great. No, it's,
I would actually be cautious about doing when they're so even versions are eventually LTS and odd versions are not ever LTS. So they will always or should always go EOL as soon as the next even version is released. During that 6 months, I guess that's when the need for translation would happen, and the majority of it would be carried over from the previous LTS anyway. But this, I guess, kind of brings in a question I have around diffing. There will always be shared content across the different docs.
right.
So is there a way, because that would help us deduplicate a lot of the work there. Is that something that's we can easily address?
Yeah, so we have an issue somewhere on the board here for applying a crowd-in workflow for reapplying translations from translation memory. So if, an FS API has 5 sentences describing the API and one of them changes from version 1 to version 2, then only that one changed sentence actually needs to be retranslated. So we basically have, that's like one of the coolest things about Crowdin is that it like is able to preserve existing translations as the content shifts around.
Yeah.
And that's across the entire sort of corpus of the documentation. So it's
Okay.
not just in one file, it's like across all the docs. So I'm not particularly concerned about the problems of moving from one version to another in terms of Crowdin's ability to like shift everything. That should happen automatically. But I am curious to hear, so like you're saying 9 is EOL. Are you kind of proposing this idea that we should just potentially only ever have even version numbers?
Yeah. So thinking about like right now, that makes sense. But in October or I guess November, at the beginning of November, that won't make sense because there will be 6 months of Node 11 that we don't translate for. So it's like when it's active that makes sense, but it can be dropped relatively quickly. So I think it's more of only ever maintain active version numbers, or sorry, even version numbers, and then whatever is active at the current moment.
Okay.
So that could be even and odd. And actually, as once this is implemented and it gets going, that should be less of a problem. Like that shouldn't be as big of an issue, but like at the initial stage, that makes sense, I think.
Okay, so if we were to yank 9 from the list today, would anyone be upset?
Are you asking me or anyone in the group? Because like I can answer
I'm
that.
asking you, but yeah.
Okay. So I think generally the adoption pattern is if you're on 9, you're going to be willing to move to 10. Like that's you're moving at a rapid enough pace that you're okay to change that frequently. Whereas if we yanked 6, it's still it's in maintenance mode, but it's still a year away from, or a year or 6 months away from end of life. So I would say no, especially since they have already existed without that. Like we're just not putting the upfront work. They've already existed without that translation, so I don't think it would be a massive issue.
Okay, cool.
I also think it's probably fine just to maybe even just work on the latest version and get that up to a better spec as opposed to working on all the past versions.
I agree with that.
That could be a thing about like, Node 11 has translations, hooray, as opposed to, okay, let's update it for everything.
And honestly, I think I really like that approach, in having it go for Node 10 LTS has translations, because that gives us till October, and I don't know if this will be complete by then. I'm not like involved enough to know that, but I think that would be a good time for that to launch that as like
that'd be
part
awesome.
of that story.
I mean, at the very least, that would be like a good goal, and kind of like we would have something to look towards to do a push. Really, yeah.
And actually, I guess that would also be Node 11, because the day Node 10 goes LTS is the day Node 11 goes is shipped. So I guess it's the same thing. So yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm just updating these PRs to yank Node 9.
And for context, everyone, that date is October 31st, 2018. Just to like have that stated, so y'all know.
Isn't that Halloween?
Okay.
What's that?
Is that Halloween?
Yes, it is.
Nice.
Every year there's the Halloween releases.
Surprise! Sorry.
Okay. So I just updated those two PRs, yanked V9 out of the list of target versions and also out of the actual content that we're adding to the repo. So we should now have 6, 8, and 10. If anyone is able to take a look at those PRs and do kind of a sanity check on them during this call, that would be cool, because then we can actually hook it up to CrowdIn. So thanks, Tierney, for that context. That is really very helpful.
Yeah, no worries.
I think we can make a call whenever we want about when or if we should switch on 11 or odd versions in general. So for now, 6, 8, and 10 should do us just fine. What else was I going to say? Yeah, so please take a look at those PRs. And then, of course, for the sake of people asynchronously visiting this stuff, just leave comments on them. But then let's also talk about it in the meetings, because I won't be watching the PRs necessarily at this very moment. Let's see.
I have a dumb question.
Yeah.
Why are we skipping odd versions?
So odd versions never go LTS. They have a 6-month life cycle, and then they're dead.
Okay.
And so that I think once this is set up and like the docs have been going, it makes sense to have it moving forward, because like it's just a continuous process, and like if we don't translate it during that change, there'll just be a lot more work at the end when an even version is shipped. But for this moment, like until this is built and this is like translated and things are done, we don't need to worry about those versions right now, because actually there aren't any odd versions that are supported.
Might be a good idea to include that in the README or something for translators coming through.
For sure.
Because that's contact information that translators may not have. So sweet, thank you.
Yes, no worries.
See, there was a question that Drew had at the bottom of that PR or that issue. Case study is the title of it. He, in the comments here, he asked if you would take a look at it.
Yeah, sorry, which?
Issue 83 or PR 83. Collect latest major versions of Node.
Got it. Thanks.
So fetch 10.0.1 creates local dir with label v10.x, which is a major version. Fetch v10.0.2 already finds local dir with label v10.x.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a great point. So in the previous incarnation of this, I had, yeah, this is perfect. A check in here to avoid actually re-downloading the content if we already had it. But it was easier to know if we already had the content because the directory name was the specific version number. Now it's this floating version. So this check won't work anymore. So that's a great catch. So I think in the interest of expediency, we should update this PR to just always download all the versions. And if it's doing gratuitous downloading and overwriting of files that are already there, then it's okay. It's basically going to mean that this script takes longer than it needs to, but it should be idempotent anyway. So I'm going to take out that clause, leave in the to-do there so that we can eventually come up with a technique for knowing whether we already downloaded that version. I had a few ideas. One could be we could swim through the files in there and find some mention in one of the change logs of the version number, and if it's in there, then we know we're dealing with the right version. We could stick a hidden file in there, kind of, you know, the way NVM works, where you have this file called .node version or something. We could use a hidden file that tells us what version we actually last downloaded. a bunch of different ways to do it. I couldn't think of like one that I really liked, so I'm kind of just decided to punt on that. If anybody has an epiphany about it, please share. In the meantime, I'm going to just fix that. So while we're on this topic, we're kind of like, I'm just like changing things willy-nilly. This won't scale, you know, as we get to things actually being sort of in production or whatever we want to call it. We probably won't be able to just change things on the fly like this. We should get CI going. So in our current situation, we don't have any kind of tests running on our actual pull requests. So I'm running tests locally, but I forget where we ended up with that. I think we got a few people chiming in from various parts of the org saying, yeah, we can turn on Travis, but I don't think we necessarily figured out how. Does that sound right, Ben?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I mean, I've like seen Node working with Travis before and like used it, but I've never integrated something into it. So I'm sure it's just a matter of asking, and we can probably figure that out. You know, I know they have I mean, Node has a ton of CI processes, so I'm sure adding like one more won't be a big deal, or whatever. But yeah, we'll figure it out.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I've actually left the content directories out of most of the PRs up until now, just to make the review process more straightforward. Sorry, hold on 1 second. I need to jump off the call just for 1 second.
No worries.
No worries. For context on the Travis stuff and also the app integration stuff, I've done a bit of outreach. I created an issue in the admin repo.
Rad.
It doesn't seem like it's gotten any feedback from the TSC. And that's like the group that would need to input on it.
Yeah.
So I'm actually reaching out to a few people who are in the TSC right now to see if either myself and I'm volunteering you, Ben, as well.
Yeah.
I can take it on if needed, or we can both do it.
Yeah.
But to just hop in a TSC meeting and kind of discuss it to get attention on this, because there are a few things that the TSC technically has the decision on right now that are blocking a bit of work in this, and so that shouldn't be happening. And so I'm trying to make sure that barrier is being lowered.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'd love to get this going so we can push that forward. Cool. That sounds good.
So I'm trying to connect the dots there and make sure that happens as soon as possible.
Would you mind briefly recapping that for Zeke?
Yeah. So there are a few things that for Zeke, for context, there's a few things that are being kind of blocked by things that the community committee doesn't have experience with doing yet, or like it's technically in the purview of the TSC. So I'm reaching out to a few people on the TSC and also have created an issue in the admin repository that is beginning to discuss some of this. But I'm going to try to get myself or Ben or you, Zeke, if you want to come, because you have you understand the technical bits of this and have been involved in that, to hop on a TSC meeting and just discuss it with them, and make sure we get it under their radar, and then that can also full disclosure, this is going to be a little groundbreaking and us sniffing out how we can do this effectively for other groups in the ComCom that eventually want to do technical bits as well. So
cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'd be happy to join you in any call as we get closer to having that set up.
Yeah. There's also an issue that Tierney provided here that we can comment on as well in the chat.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Also, one of the people who I just reached out to said this is probably something really good to talk about at the Collab Summit, which I keep forgetting is in like 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
it's much sooner than I thought it was. So that's probably actually a better time to pull it together. But having because I know a few people here will be there, so having that context and discussing people there or discussing with people there, not talking about people's back,
We
would
are
be
going to discuss people there. No.
that'd be an ideal thing. So just wanted to keep that on the radar as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Tierney.
So I'm just looking at Druv. Is that how you say it? Druv? Druv's
Hey.
feedback. Hey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Yes, there's an issue with the internet here.
No problem.
Yes.
So I went ahead and updated this PR to not check for the existence of the directory. So I think we should actually be good at this point.
Can we keep these two PRs 83 and 84 on hold for 2-3 days, like until we figure out some way to just fetch minor versions instead of the minor versions, or simply node versions instead of fetching the whole document repository? Like when you submitted the PR, actually it used to check for the major version like 10.x or 8.x, and now after these changes that we made now, so it checks for the versions that we'll be fetching like 10.1.1.0, 8.11.0. So until we figure out some way that we can actually fetch what is the change in the document, so as to not make duplicate copies or every time fetch whole documents for the versions. So keep these two PRs on hold for 2-3 days, I guess.
Sure. If you think we need to do that, I guess my perspective is that the only drawback of the way that we're doing it now is that it requires more downloading. So that is definitely an issue, especially in bandwidth constrained environments where if you run npm run collect, you're downloading, it's now going to be 3 different tarballs of Node that contain not just the documentation, but all of the source code. So I guess in an ideal world, we would only be able to, we would have a situation where we could download only the content that changed, but that would also require a lot of code to actually try and figure out what changed between versions. So my inclination would be to roll forward with what we have, knowing that it is the directory structure that we want. If we all agree that this is the structure we want, then I think we can iterate on improving the process for collecting the docs as we go. The thing that I wouldn't want us to do is decide later that, oh, this isn't the directory structure we want, and we have to yank everything out and repopulate it. Which actually, as I say that, that wouldn't be the end of the world either, because we would still have everything that was already translated would still be in the translation memory in Crowdin. So I guess the thing that we would want to avoid is, or the thing that I would want to nail down is a directory structure, and ultimately a structure for the module that we export that is consistent for consumers of this content, specifically the website. So I personally feel like we're at a phase right now where we don't have to solve that specific problem, but if we need to take more time, that's also fine too. What do you think, Druv?
Awesome. Actually, like for the PR 84. So for example, fetching 10, 8, and 6, we have 219 files to be fetched up, like 219 markdown documents files actually.
Yeah.
So like for example, if we have the second loop, like we'll be fetching 10.12.1, something like that, hypothetically. So we'll have to fetch around one third of these files, around 80 to 90 files of documentations again, the case.
Yes.
So like if we can figure out some way that we can keep the information about the documentation, like the how Git actually does the difference function. What it actually does, it tracks the difference between two files, only fetches up the difference the changes made. So if we can figure out a way like we can save the information or the markdown files we have already fetched in the previous version. So before fetching the whole tar.gz or the ball file or the zipped file for the document, we can somehow manipulate the file and fetch only the markdown files which are not already in the content folder, like 10.x, which are not already inside the folder.
Sure. So when Vanessa and I were actually setting up this, the first pass at this collection script, we talked about using Git instead of actually using downloading tarballs. And if you git clone the node.js/node repository, it's actually really, really big. It takes a very long time to clone. So I think the scenario that you're describing sounds sort of like possibly using Node.js/node as a submodule or something along those lines, where we could actually use Git to do a diff between two versions. So that is kind of that is something we could do. But if what we're hoping to do is optimize the developer experience or the amount of time required to actually run this process, then I think it might be challenging. Also, I think in the long run, this particular script should ideally be automated. So right now you run npm run collect on, some human is going to have to do that step for the time being. And that'll be on someone's actual machine, and they'll open a pull request and say, look, I updated the source content, here's a PR. Eventually, when things are actually moving and we're comfortable with the process that we've created, we can apply some kind of script that will check for the latest node versions, update the target node versions for each major, and then actually download them. So in the end, this process will be running somewhere in the cloud, at least the way that I sort of envisioned it working. So the downloading a tarball that contains extraneous files is not, it's not, I don't see it as being problematic. I think it's more straightforward than trying to do a diff of the changed files.
Yeah, +1, that sounds good.
So Drev, you said issue. Yeah, can you follow up with an issue that sort of outlines what we want to optimize about this collection script, and then we can have a conversation about it there?
Yes, I'll surely submit an issue about optimizing this flow for downloading of documentation as soon as I get time from my visa application and other stuff. Maybe day after tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Maybe.
Cool.
Okay.
In that case, Drev, are you cool with approving these PRs to land?
Like for now, we can actually get these PRs merged, but I feel we might face this issue later on in the flow, like when we get some minor releases for Node. But now, yes, we can, like, I'll approve it now.
Okay, cool.
Here we go. Like, also, before approving actually the 84, the PR number 84,
Yeah.
like, do we every time have to fetch all the contents for documentations into the repository, the internationalization repository, or like we can set a CI doing all these stuff rather than pulling all the documentation into the internationalization repository? Like, if we do this, we'll be having duplicate copies of documents in the Node.js organization itself. Like the documentation would be in the Node core repository, the documentation would be in this repository, the internationalization repository. Like at some stage, or maybe I'm not very much clear about division. At some stage, the new website might need to, like, I'm not familiar with Crowdin APIs, but we have to, like, we have to get these documentations up for the website, the new website also. So rather than actually, I'm not pretty sure what Node core or the TSA decides about. Like if we can actually keep all these documentations for major releases or any of the releases into a separate repository rather than like pulling those documentations into the internationalization repository every time, also keeping duplicate copies of documentations everywhere. Like the 84 here is actually what? It's actually fetching all those documentation from Node core, I guess. Actually fetching documentation from Node core and making a duplicate copy in the organization itself.
Okay, yeah. So the reason we decided to create a separate repository is because when you integrate a repository with Crowdin, it creates a great deal of noise on the repository, just in terms of creating issues and pull requests. So we could have actually just connected Crowdin directly to Node.js/node repository and pointed it right at the source content. But it would have a noticeable effect on the workflow of people working on Node, who would see like their commit history just bombarded with translations. So we took the path of having a separate repository specifically for housing the source content as well as the translated markdown content as well. So like you were saying, yes, ultimately we will have some kind of CI process that automates the updating of this content. And we could use, so if we use Travis, we could Travis has a new service for doing cron jobs, which are like scheduled tasks that you can run every, I think Travis allows you to do them every day. I can't remember what the shortest interval is, but if we want a shorter interval, we can also consider using something like Heroku Scheduler, which lets us run every 10 minutes. So once we actually have this Crowdin integration configured, that'll all happen automatically. And by that, I mean new content in the i18n repo being imported into Crowdin and exported from Crowdin back to the repository.
But meanwhile, like we'll be duplicating the main English document into this repository too from the Node core.
Correct. Yes. So that is
also,
one.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Like actually, as you mentioned, like Crowdin will do many other stuffs and other commits into the repository, so that we cannot allow Crowdin to access to Node core repository, obviously. So if we can make a proposal of getting documentation into a very separate repository inside Node.js Foundation, inside Node.js, obviously. So can we do that? Like give the permissions for documentation access to Crowdin with access to that new separate repository for documentations. So as new documentations can be published or can be made inside that documentations repository rather than on Node core. So like every time we don't have to fetch these, or we or either the CI don't have to fetch the the documentations from Node core. We don't have to make schedulers, and we don't have to make some triggers that shall fetch the contents that have been made in the minor versions later on. So we can set a separate repository for documentations where people who are already into the documentations part for Node core, we will publish documentation inside the repository, and Crowdin will have access to the repository. So no trouble with Node core, no trouble fetching documentations every time, or like duplicating documentations every time into internationalization repository. Can we do that?
So I'm not totally sure I understand what you're proposing, because here we do have another repository, but are you saying that Node in general should move toward a model where documentation is written in English in a separate repository that is not Node.js/Node?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that's realistic, just given that for the entire lifespan of the Node project, the docs have lived in the same repository as the source code. And that's the same for Electron. And I think that's kind of been essential to the success of the project, is that the documentation and the implementation live together. So when an API changes, a pull request includes not only the changes to that API, but also the changes to the documentation that reflect what happened. So having those two together in the same repository is actually, for the most part, it's actually beneficial and much more transparent to the users of the project. So I think even though there is some sort of frustration at the idea of having to download docs all the time, it's kind of a fact of life for like setting up automation that moves content from one place to another is kind of unavoidable, I think. Also, like in order for the Crowdin integration to work, the source English content and the translated content have to live in the same repository. And so we have that crowdin.yaml file, which somebody opened a PR for and we landed and is now in the repository. That's like a mapping of like where the source content lives and where the corresponding target translated content should live as well. So I think the structure that we have now is sustainable, and yeah. But again, definitely, if you have ideas about how to improve the content collection process so it's less arduous either for humans or for machines, then definitely want to hear it.
Okay, sure. Like when I have some ideas, some new proposal for fetching or collecting these contents, will surely raise an issue or either comment in the PR 83 or 84. Like,
Okay.
Like we should like skip this topic, as for now we have others other agendas to discuss.
Okay. So
Sure.
we're running short on time, so I think we probably won't actually get to do the integration today. But we can continue this conversation on GitHub and see where we get with actually getting source content landed in the repo. So I do definitely want to, at some point, have a recording of the process used to actually set up this integration, just so people know. Like, it kind of only needs to happen once, but having gone through it once for Electron, I know it was a little bit challenging, and there were some edges that were not, there were some aspects of the setup that were not totally intuitive. So
could we set up just a separate meeting for that within the next like week or something, and then
yeah,
we can record it and just make it happen.
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great.
Awesome.
So we've got 8 minutes left. If we want to take a look at the project board and see if there are any other burning questions on anyone's mind about things we need to address as a group here that we can't as easily solve just asynchronously on GitHub.
Hey, Seek.
Yeah.
Seek, can you guide me a little about the crowding, creating the crowding glossary? Like, if you have any resource where I can check how to build a crowding glossary so that I can make a PR later on.
Yeah, so let me drop a link in here. So there's one link, and then there's another one for, I just added some documentation to the Electron contributor page about glossaries. So we actually have 2 glossaries in Electron world. Oops, I'm actually, somehow I just switched to only sending those messages to Drove. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so if you go to that Crowdin glossary repository in the Crowdin modules org, the easiest way to understand what this is look at that screenshot in the README. So I'll just drop a link to that screenshot here. So the gist is when you're in the Crowdin translation interface, you'll see, as a translator, you'll see underlined strings in the source content that you can hover over, and they have these helpful messages. And the message can be anything that we want. So for Electron, we have a glossary that is mostly informing people of stuff they shouldn't be translating. That's the main goal of it, but we also sprinkle it with a little bit of context about Electron-specific terminology as well. So things like string is a JavaScript built-in and should usually not be translated. And we were very specific. Like it took a few iterations to get the language right in the description there, because first it was string should not be translated, but there are some cases where maybe string should be translated. So we intentionally used some language that says, in general, you don't want to translate this. We don't want to be like, we can't cover all cases. We can't know what the right thing to do is in all cases. So we use this kind of general language. So I extracted the glossary builder from Electron and turned it into this module so that we can use it on Node as well. And there is a Node module called built-ins, which has a list of a bunch of like properties and data types and primitives and things like that that come from JavaScript or from web browser land or from Node. So we can use that globals module to kind of bootstrap a list of glossary terms that we want to add to the Crowdin UI. So the API is really simple there. It's basically you create a glossary, you use the add method to add a bunch of terms, and then you upload it. And you have to have a Crowdin API key. So we need to figure out a way to share that key among members of this group. The way we kind of worked around that on Electron is we actually have the Electron website is a proxy for the Crowdin API. So any kind of get method, so this wouldn't work for the glossary, but any other method that where you're fetching content from Crowdin's API, we inject the Crowdin API key on the website side so anyone can consume that content without a key. And that's how we've been able to let contributors participate without having any special secrets. So in terms of uploading the glossary, though, maybe we can do that in CI. Maybe we can figure out a way to store the secrets somewhere so that we don't have to pass that token around. We can just solve the problem in code somewhere, and it'll automatically get uploaded as part of like the build process or something. So Drev, feel free to open a PR and just ping me on it, and we can iterate on how to build it out. And you can also obviously start that now before we actually get the content ready.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So when Tierney was talking about having this the TSC meeting, was that specifically around getting CI set up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool.
It's sort of setting new precedent. I mean, ComCom is not, there are things that are, you know, standardized in the TSC that are not in ComCom, and ComCom is sort of like moving towards that. So these are just like growing steps for ComCom.
Okay, cool. I think once we land content, like the actual markdown files in the repo, I think that'll be kind of the critical point where we should have CI set up. So
absolutely, yeah. I think if you and I both jump on that, and whoever else wants to, we'll draw attention to it and get the blockers unblocked.
Cool. Well, this is good. I feel like we're right on the cusp of having this project really getting some momentum. With the collaborator summit coming up in 2 weeks, it would be really cool if we, by the time we get to that, to having those meetings, we actually had some real substance in this repository, something, the basis upon which to inform our conversations with the website group about how that content should be served to the website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I just put an issue out for scheduling the meeting for the crowd and GitHub integration. So hopefully,
okay, awesome.
I would love to get that done like ASAP, especially before then, so we can just be ready to go when we get there.
Cool, great.
Awesome. Well, awesome, y'all. Thank you, Zeke. Thank you for all your time, everybody, for being here. And this is great. This is really exciting. Thank you for your awesome work, Zeke. Thanks for Richard and Dhruv and everyone for what you're doing. Yeah, we're getting cooking.
It's gonna be so cool when we actually turn it on, because like we started getting translations so quickly on Electron, and Node is just a way bigger project. So yeah. I think we'll be pretty impressed by the influx of translators from around the world.
Absolutely, yeah. So stoked, man. All right, y'all. Cool. Well, great. Top of the hour, and we'll see you next time. Be sure to join us on the, say when you're available on that issue, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Before, we totally failed to set up a note taker. I wrote some notes for like the first 20 minutes, and then I got distracted, and I apologize about that.
I recorded.
So there is notes in the hackpad, and we should put that over, but we don't have a notes for this meeting. So before we leave, should someone go through and write notes, or should we just put it in the issues and just let it be okay?
I think we should take what we have in the HackMD and share it in the repo. And then we can also follow up with the recording.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. All right, thanks.
And I'll make sure that this gets published to the Node YouTube channel as well.
Thanks.
Because this is like a sub ComCom channel, I think, that we're using today.
Okay.
All right.
All right, y'all.
See ya.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.